Frequency Podcast Network. Stories that matter, podcasts that resonate.
It seemed to come out of nowhere, prompting outages because of demand, and most had never heard of it. DeepSeek, the Chinese startup founded in 2023, says it's created a chatbot which competes with the latest technology for a fraction of the cost. So $6 million spent in 2 months, compared to hundreds of billions of dollars spent by other U.S. companies on AI infrastructure over a period of years. So some are calling it a game changer. I'm Kris McCusker, and in this episode of The Big Story, we speak to a Canadian economist about what it all means to Canadian tech companies and to Canadians. Graham Dobbs is senior economist at the Dais, Toronto Metropolitan University. Thanks so much for doing this.
No problem.
So walk me through what you know about DeepSeek.
As far as I know, DeepSeek is an offshoot of a Chinese hedge fund that mostly worked in applying AI to financial markets. They have a few research papers that kind of discussed some of the inner workings of what we're seeing now in their most recent model, AI model called the R1.
So, are they known as a tech company, as an AI company, as a hedge fund adjacent company? How do you know of them?
To be honest with you, I'd only heard about them in the news yesterday or maybe last week. They're a startup, so there isn't much information on them. We know they're based out of China, and that's probably one of the main reasons why we haven't heard much, because of kind of the majority of what we've seen in innovation has come out of North America in terms of kind of these more advanced AI models and generative AI and large language models.
Based on what I've read, it's been described as like a rival or a competitor maybe to OpenAI and in particular ChatGPT. Based on your research, does that sound accurate? Is that a fair comparison?
I would say it can be, based on their claims of developing an AI system that acts like OpenAI's ChatGPT in performance, but costs far less. And that's why I wouldn't say necessarily they're a full-fledged competitor, but they're one that obviously is a threat to the current kind of dominance OpenAI has in developing these really sophisticated AI models.
Well, and that's sort of the claim to fame here, right? It costs far less, and this chatbot was built in far less time.
Yeah, and I think that tends to happen anytime we see one of these kind of large, kind of, I guess, broader general purpose technologies, similar to that of the internet. We have a first mover that really tries to, I guess, build a moat around their innovation, whether that be having, a substantial market share or kind of a trade secret. And then there's a second mover who tends to at least compete in performance and offers some sort of cost saving or typically more efficient. And this is what we're seeing from DeepSeek.
In other words, sort of to be determined whether or not it's really a true competitor.
Yes, I think that's so. And, there's actually, it's quite funny. Google had released its own kind of more economical version AI reasoning model a few days ago, built on similar techniques we're seeing from DeepSeek, but it was nearly as not much of a revelation. And it's also not open source or free, like DeepSeek's model currently is. So we didn't really hear much about that, but we heard a lot about DeepSeek kind of democratizing what we call kind of reasoning AI models.
Do you have concerns? And the reason I'm asking this question in this way is because there has been a lot of talk in North America of late about TikTok and the potential ban that we could see in the US at some point. And this feels to me like another Chinese app that could be problematic in the same way as TikTok.
Yes, I have heard quite a bit of that sentiment, and I think it really stems from the issue around personal information and data security. Because we know right now that DeepSeek offers, this their product, this AI reasoning model, for essentially free. And we know when sometimes a product is free, it inevitably means that the product that is being sold is the users that use the product. And so, there's some kind of far-reaching implications for what's going on with some of the things or some of the data that's potentially being ingested.
The other thing I wonder about is the innovation side to all of this. And NVIDIA, even though the stock took a major hit yesterday and the biggest cut to market cap in market history, still acknowledging the advancements around artificial intelligence. So it's sort of a double-edged sword, is it not?
A double-edged sword is hard to say. I think the particular sentiment from investors around kind of AI infrastructure companies, ones like NVIDIA, AMD, and chip fabrication firms like Taiwan Semiconductors, is that for a long while now, since we've had kind of the release of ChatGPT in November of 2022, NVIDIA has been kind of the dominant and pretty much the only real competitor in the arena to power these types of AI models. And what we're seeing from DeepSeek is that you don't necessarily need the fastest or necessarily NVIDIA only hardware to run these models or adopt them for a particular business or use case you might have.
There have also been suggestions that maybe this isn't exactly as it looks, that perhaps there's something to this that we don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's somewhere in the middle. So I think it's clear that DeepSeek has developed an innovation in building these very computationally and energy intensive AI models, but it's still unclear whether DeepSeek can seriously substantiate the immense kind of efficiency gains or cost reductions it's done with respect to the model it's developed. And we don't necessarily know how much kind of computing power it really used. And I think it has a lot to do with some of the tariffs and export bans around computer chips to China.
Yeah, because there are a lot of rules around this kind of technology, correct?
I would say there are rules that are in the workings, particularly in Europe, and ones that have kind of been a little more lax in other jurisdictions. Canada, for one, was developing a kind of an AI and data safety act that was not enacted, and since the government is prorogued, we don't really necessarily know where it'll land. But in terms of actual trade barriers, there are quite a few.
It feels a little bit like this sort of ups the ante when it comes to artificial intelligence. Like one of the lines that I read in a story was that it sort of puts into question the US and its perceived dominance around artificial intelligence.
I agree with that. I think lately we've seen the majority of American AI companies try a strategy in which they try to throw as much information or data and computing power at the models they develop in order to make them better at reasoning and mathematical calculations and logic. But they've kind of hit a bit of a barrier, and what that poses that there are better ways than just, trying to throw the kitchen sink at a problem like this. And I think DeepSeek is prompting a reevaluation of that strategy, and kind of the focus and this kind of frenzy around trying to acquire as many semiconductors as you possibly can, particularly for kind of the Magnificent Seven. So I think there's also another thing to think about, and it has been actually said by one of OpenAI's current competitors in the space, which is Cohere, and their co-founder Aidan Gomez. He said the future of AI is actually going to be small. We're going to be able to deploy models that work for businesses and small startups, as well as researchers that don't require, millions, if not billions, of dollars in computing hardware and these large, huge data racks. One day or very soon, we'll be able to deploy this on, just a work laptop, let's say.
That's sort of the question that some people may still have. Things like chatbots and, Chat GPT, if people have not sort of discovered a use for these sorts of technology, it sounds like at some point they may.
Yeah, and I think to sum it up, is that DeepSeek's current R1 model has demonstrated that scaling up compute power is not the only and far from the best way to develop innovations in AI currently. And while we'd seen these kind of large jumps in OpenAI's ChatGPT ability to reason and perform math calculations and pass tests, we see it also led to huge negative externalities like the massive power consumption and cooling needs it had. So it's a good thing that we're seeing an early competitor in the market that might be able to contend with some of these things we're currently seeing in kind of the American incumbent AI firms.
I think you sort of sum it up nicely there. It potentially is game-changing.
Correct. And, even in the case of Canada, I had written a report that recently looked at the kind of capacity of Canada's public computing infrastructure relative to our kind of more friendly nations. And, we have some of the lowest amount of compute relative to places like the UK and France, and very much so less than the United States. And it's something we'd actually recently invested in. The federal government announced about $2.4 billion directly to AI compute. But based on the numbers we see from kind of the large American firms, this is a bit of a drop in the bucket. So I think it's a good thing and a strategy that Canada probably will need to kind of think a little differently about. We're not going to be able to keep up with these, computing giants, and we have to find more innovative ways of keeping up with the kind of innovation race that's currently going on in AI.
I just want to circle back here to Cohere. That's the company with Canadian founders. I guess we should be keeping an eye on them.
Cohere was founded from a few individuals based out of the University of Toronto. And if you don't know, one of the tenured professors at the University of Toronto, Geoffrey Hinton, recently received a Nobel because of his contributions to AI, specifically around image classification. And funnily enough, Geoffrey Hinton was probably one of the first people to recognize NVIDIA or NVIDIA hardware as one of the kind of key ingredients into developing his kind of model that allowed people to kind of better or more accurately kind of classify vision-related problems, like, identifying whether something's a cat or a dog. But this is all to say that Canada has an abundance of world-renowned AI talent, as well as a very strong startup and venture industry in AI. But as I'd said before, we sort of lack maybe the tools, computing infrastructure, to kind of keep up with what we're seeing happen south of the border.
Well, thank you so much for doing this today. I really appreciate you taking the time.
I really appreciate the opportunity.
You can find more of Graham's papers at Dais, DAIS.ca. That wraps up another episode of The Big Story, which you can find on the Seeker app. Please rate, review, follow, and share. I'm Kris McCusker. Thanks for listening.